The American Yawp, Chapter 22. The 1920s are remembered as an era of affluence and of post-war conservatism. The decade was a time of dramatic social, economic, and political change in the U.S. Economic recessions in 1921 and 1922 gave way to a new American era of cultural conflict and economic acceleration that historians sometimes call the Roaring Twenties. The mass production and consumption of new automobiles, new household appliances, Hollywood films, new radio programs, fueled a new economy and new standards of living. New mass entertainment introduced talking movies and jazz music, while sexual and social restraints loosened, allowing women new personal freedoms most would have considered unthinkable a few years prior. But at the same time, many Americans turned their back on political and economic reform during the 1920s, denounced America's shifting demographics, stifled immigration, retreated toward old-time religion, and revived the KKK with 1 million new members. In his inauguration speech at the end of the decade, 1928, President Herbert Hoover trumpeted claims that the Republican Party had brought the American people a new era of prosperity. He could not see the weaknesses behind the decade's economy. Even as a new culture of consumption promoted new freedoms, it also promoted new insecurities. An economy built on credit exposed the nation to tremendous risk. Flailing European economies, high tariffs, wealth inequality, a building construction bubble, and flooded consumer credit markets loomed dangerously until the Roaring Twenties became a scream on Wall Street. In a moment, the nation's glitz and glamour seemed to give way to decay and despair. For farmers, racial minorities, poor workers, and other populations that did not share in the 1920s boom, the veneer of the jazz age and the booming economy had always been a fiction. But for them, as for millions of Americans, the end of an era was close. Speculation on Wall Street had triggered an economic collapse. The Great Depression now loomed.